Artificial intelligence is everywhere right now, and everyone has an opinion. But what does it actually do to the world, good and bad, when you get past the headlines? To talk honestly about AI's influence, we need to start with a basic fact: artificial intelligence is not one single thing. It's a family of technologies. There's machine learning, where systems improve by processing data. There's natural language processing, which lets computers understand and generate text. There's computer vision, which lets machines interpret images and video. And in the last few years, there's generative AI systems like large language models that can produce text, images, code, and audio that look genuinely human-made. When people say AI is changing the world, they usually mean some combination of all of these working together, often invisibly, inside products and services most of us already use every day. The smartphone that unlocks with your face, the email filter that catches spam, the recommendation engine that suggests your next show, that's all AI, and it's been running for years. What's changed recently is the scale, the capability, and the public awareness. So before we decide whether AI is worth it, we need to be clear about what we're actually evaluating. A small number of companies have outsized influence over how AI develops. Google, which is now part of Alphabet, has been doing serious AI research for well over a decade. Its DeepMind division produced AlphaFold, a system that predicted the three-dimensional structure of nearly every known protein, a scientific problem that had stumped researchers for 50 years. Microsoft made a massive investment in OpenAI and integrated its technology into products used by hundreds of millions of people, including Word, Excel, and its search engine Bing. OpenAI itself released ChatGPT in late 2022, and it became the fastest-growing consumer application in history up to that point, reaching 100 million users in about 2 months. Meta, Amazon, and Apple all have major AI research divisions. NVIDIA, which makes the graphics processing units that most AI training runs on, saw its market value rise dramatically because without its hardware, almost none of the modern AI systems could exist. These aren't fringe technology experiments anymore. These are the largest and most profitable companies in the world, betting their futures on AI. If you want to make the strongest possible case for AI being genuinely good for the world, healthcare is probably where you start. AI systems are now diagnosing certain diseases from medical images with accuracy that rivals trained specialists. Google's DeepMind developed an AI that can detect over 50 eye diseases from a standard retinal scan, which matters enormously in parts of the world where ophthalmologists are scarce. In cancer screening, AI tools are being used to identify potential tumors in mammograms that radiologists might miss on an initial review, not replacing the radiologist, but giving them a second set of eyes that doesn't get tired. AlphaFold's protein structure predictions have already accelerated drug discovery research across dozens of labs worldwide. Researchers who would have spent years determining one protein structure can now access predictions for millions of them. There are real limitations here. AI diagnostic tools have to be validated carefully across diverse populations because they can reflect the biases in their training data, but the underlying potential to detect disease earlier, more accurately, and more cheaply in under-resourced settings is real and is already saving lives in some documented cases. AI is being applied to climate and energy problems with some genuine results, though it's worth being careful about overselling this. On the positive side, Google reported that using AI to optimize the cooling systems in its data centers reduced the energy used for cooling by a meaningful percentage, around 40% in some configurations. AI is being used to improve weather and climate modeling, to optimize the routing of electricity through power grids, and to accelerate the discovery of new materials for solar panels and batteries. Microsoft has partnered with energy companies to use AI for predicting wind power output more accurately, which helps grid operators rely on renewables more confidently. On the other side of the ledger, training large AI models consumes substantial amounts of electricity and water for cooling. A single large training run for a frontier model can emit roughly as much carbon as several transatlantic flights. Inference, meaning the energy cost of using the model every time someone asks it a question, adds up continuously. The honest picture is that AI may help solve parts of the climate problem while simultaneously contributing to it, depending on where the electricity comes from and how efficiently the systems are designed. One of the quieter but potentially significant effects of AI is what it does to access to expertise. For most of human history, getting detailed, personalized guidance on a complex topic meant either knowing the right people or paying for professional advice. A student in a rural area with no access to a chemistry tutor can now ask a large language model to walk them through a concept at whatever pace and level they need. Someone in a country where legal advice is prohibitively expensive can at least get a general understanding of their options before deciding whether to hire a lawyer. Khan Academy, the non-profit education platform, has built an AI tutoring tool called Khanmigo specifically designed to guide students through problems without just giving them the answer, trying to replicate what a good human tutor does. This doesn't eliminate inequality in education, and there are serious questions about whether students are learning or just outsourcing their thinking. But the idea that a reasonably sophisticated thinking partner is now available to almost anyone with an internet connection is genuinely new, and it's worth taking seriously as a development with positive potential. Multiple studies published in the last couple of years have tried to measure what AI tools actually do to productivity, and the results are more nuanced than either the hype or the fear suggests. A study involving software developers found that those using an AI coding assistant called GitHub Copilot completed tasks notably faster than those who didn't, in some tasks, around 55% faster. A study involving customer service workers found that AI assistants raised performance more for less experienced workers than for experts, which is interesting because it suggests AI may narrow the skill gap rather than simply amplifying the skills of people who are already excellent. Goldman Sachs and other financial institutions have published estimates that AI could add significant value to global economic output over the coming decade, though these projections carry enormous uncertainty and depend on assumptions that are hard to verify. What does seem reliable is that some specific, bounded tasks, summarizing documents, writing first drafts, finding patterns in large datasets, writing and debugging code, are being done faster and at lower cost. Whether that translates to genuine economic growth or primarily to job displacement is the harder and more contested question. Let's not skip past the job question, because it's real and it's serious. Previous waves of automation tended to affect physically repetitive tasks and mostly impacted blue-collar workers. What's different about AI, and particularly generative AI, is that it's reaching into white-collar, knowledge-based work: writing, coding, analysis, customer support, legal research, graphic design. This doesn't mean all those jobs disappear overnight. It means the number of people needed to do certain tasks changes, and the specific skills that are valued shift. Some roles are already being reduced at companies that have adopted AI tools. A number of media companies have experimented with AI-generated content and reduced their editorial staff, sometimes with quality results that were quietly bad. Chegg, an education company that sells homework help subscriptions, saw its revenue drop significantly after ChatGPT launched because students simply stopped paying for a service they could get for free. These aren't hypothetical future risks. They're things that are happening now to real workers. The standard economic argument is that new technology creates new jobs to replace the old ones, and historically that's been broadly true, but it doesn't automatically happen on a humane timeline or for the specific people who are displaced. Generative AI has made it significantly easier to produce convincing false content at scale, and that's a serious problem. Deepfake videos, synthetic video that puts words or actions into someone's mouth that they never said or did, have existed for a few years, but the quality and the ease of production have both increased sharply. Audio cloning, where someone's voice can be replicated from a short sample, has been used in scam calls where fraudsters impersonate a family member claiming to be in trouble and asking for money. These aren't theoretical attack scenarios. Documented cases exist and law enforcement agencies have flagged them. In politics, the ability to generate realistic-looking fake images, fake quotes, and fake video of candidates or public figures raises genuine concerns about elections. The 2024 election cycle in multiple countries saw AI-generated content appear in political advertising and disinformation campaigns. Content detection tools exist, but they're imperfect and often lag behind the generation tools. The companies building these systems have implemented some safeguards. OpenAI and others have policies against generating certain categories of content, but enforcement is inconsistent and determined bad actors tend to find workarounds. AI systems learn from data, and the data they learn from reflects the world as it was, not necessarily as it should be. This creates a well-documented problem. AI systems can encode and amplify existing biases in ways that are hard to detect and hard to correct. There have been notable cases where facial recognition systems performed significantly worse on darker-skinned faces than on lighter-skinned ones, an issue documented by researcher Joy Buolamwini at MIT Media Lab. Hiring tools trained on historical hiring data can disadvantage groups that were historically underrepresented in certain industries. AI systems used in the criminal justice system for things like predicting recidivism risk have been criticized for producing racially disparate outcomes. The response from the AI research community has been an entire subfield dedicated to fairness, accountability, and transparency in machine learning, and real progress has been made in understanding these problems. But understanding a problem and solving it are different things. Many AI systems are deployed in consequential settings: hiring, lending, healthcare triage, criminal justice, where biased outputs directly affect real people's lives, and the oversight mechanisms in many jurisdictions have not kept up. AI dramatically extends what surveillance is capable of. Facial recognition technology is already deployed at scale by some governments, most notably in China, where it is part of a broad monitoring infrastructure used in public spaces and tied to systems that track citizens' behavior. But this isn't only a distant authoritarian concern. Law enforcement agencies in the United States have used facial recognition in criminal investigations, and there are documented cases where misidentifications led to wrongful arrests. Employers use AI-powered monitoring tools to track remote workers' keystrokes, screen activity, and even facial expressions during video calls. Advertisers build behavioral profiles from AI analysis of browsing patterns. Every time you interact with an AI assistant, that interaction is typically logged and used to improve the system, which raises questions about what happens to sensitive information shared in those conversations. The data privacy laws in most countries were written before modern AI existed, and regulators are playing catch-up. The European Union's AI Act, which passed in 2024, attempts to create a risk-tiered regulatory framework, but its practical enforcement and global reach remain to be seen. Beyond healthcare, AI is accelerating scientific research in ways that are harder to see but potentially very significant over a long-time horizon. In materials science, AI tools are being used to predict properties of new materials before synthesizing them, which speeds up the search for better batteries, stronger alloys, and more efficient semiconductors. In mathematics, DeepMind's AlphaGeometry systems solve geometry problems at a level competitive with Olympiad gold medalists, problems that require genuine logical reasoning, not just pattern matching. In astronomy, AI is helping researchers process the enormous volumes of data produced by modern telescopes, identifying candidate objects and anomalies that humans couldn't get through manually in a reasonable timeframe. Climate scientists use machine learning to improve the resolution and accuracy of climate simulations. These contributions don't make the front page the way a chatbot does, but they represent AI functioning as a tool that expands what human researchers can do rather than replacing them, and in some fields, the compounding effect of faster research cycles could be substantial over decades. There's a longer-term debate in the AI research community about risks that aren't about today's systems but about the trajectory of the technology. Some researchers, including figures at places like Anthropic and the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, argue that building AI systems that are more capable than humans across many domains creates risks if those systems aren't reliably aligned with human values and intentions. This is usually called the alignment problem. It's a legitimate research question, but it's also genuinely contested. Other researchers think the risks are overstated or that the framing is wrong. What's less contested is that today's systems already fail in unpredictable ways. Large language models hallucinate, they produce confident, fluent, entirely false statements, and this isn't a quirk that's been fully solved. They can be manipulated through what are called prompt injection attacks. They sometimes behave differently in deployment than they did in testing. These are real, current engineering problems, separate from the more speculative long-term concerns, and they matter because AI systems are being deployed in high-stakes settings before those problems are fully understood or fixed. The skeptical case against AI deserves a fair hearing. Some critics point out that many AI productivity claims are based on narrow benchmarks that don't reflect messy real-world conditions. A system that can pass a medical licensing exam doesn't necessarily perform reliably when a patient's situation doesn't fit neatly into a category. The democratization of knowledge argument has limits too. People without the literacy or the context to critically evaluate what an AI tells them may be worse off with a confidently wrong AI than with no answer at all. There's also a concentration of power concern that gets less attention than it deserves. the most capable AI systems are controlled by a handful of enormous corporations and, to a lesser extent, a few governments. Open-source AI efforts exist and are genuinely making the technology more accessible, but the frontier models, the most powerful ones, require capital for training and infrastructure that only a very small number of organizations can afford. That means decisions about how these systems behave, what they refuse to do, and who gets access to them are being made by a very small group of people, largely without democratic accountability. One of the most honest things you can say about AI's influence on the world is that its benefits are not evenly distributed. The people who benefit most right now tend to be people who already have skills, access, and context to use AI tools effectively, people who can critically evaluate AI output, who know how to prompt these systems well, who work in industries where AI augmentation is possible. The people most at risk of harm, from job displacement, from biased systems used against them and consequential decisions, from surveillance, often don't have the resources or influence to shape how these systems are built or governed. Globally, the gap between countries with strong AI industries and those without is widening. The compute needed to train frontier models is concentrated in a few countries. Data from every corner of the world is used to train these systems, often without meaningful compensation or consent to the people who generated it. This doesn't mean AI is net negative, but it does mean that treating AI as universally beneficial is a perspective that tends to be held by people who are on the beneficial side of that distribution. So is AI a good influence on the world? The honest answer is, in parts, yes, meaningfully so, and in other parts, it's creating real harms that aren't being managed well enough. The case for AI's positive influence is strongest in scientific research, healthcare diagnostics, and the expansion of access to information and tools that were previously only available to a privileged few. Those are not small things. Early cancer detection saves lives. Faster drug discovery matters. Giving a first-generation college student access to a patient tutoring system is genuinely valuable. The case against AI's current trajectory is strongest around labor disruption without adequate social support, the normalization of surveillance, the production of misinformation at industrial scale, and the concentration of enormous capability in the hands of a small number of organizations with limited accountability. The flaw in most public conversation about AI is that it treats the technology as a single thing that is either good or bad, when it's actually a set of tools whose effects depend heavily on how they're built, who controls them, how they're deployed, and what institutions exist to provide oversight. That's not a satisfying conclusion, but it's the accurate one. If you want to stay informed about how these systems are actually developing, not just the hype, subscribing is the best way to keep up as things change.